Welcome here to a very special Saxon Spotlight here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora in our exclusive multimedia marketing partnership with Alfred University. It is my absolute honor and privilege to be here with you this morning with Peter Cuneo, who is obviously connected to Alfred University as an alum and has an incredible career of so many different things for us to speak on today. And we've gotten to talk off the air, which has been a wonderful and tremendous experience for me. Now I get to share that with you. Peter, how are you today?
Dan, I'm very well. I'm sitting here in Connecticut. Um, we sometimes use the phrase for a talk, fireside chat.
Yes.
So this is half a fireside chat, but there's no fire. It is summertime.
Yeah. Well, and I did tell you when we have spoken before that I couldn't help but stare at that fireplace. I think you get some type of award, some type of gold medal for that fireplace that you have, because I would love for that to be sitting somewhere in my home as well.
Well, we have on our property here in Connecticut a lot of those famous Connecticut stone walls.
Yeah.
And when we were building this particular building um, quite a number of years ago, I did sketch out what you see in the back.
Yeah.
And we had Italian stonemasons, and they said, "We'll just take the stones from your walls." And so I think it's kind of fun.
It is, and when we look at kind of that create, like you said, kind of drawing it out and that creation of it all. When we go back to your time at Alfred University, the creativity was seen there as well. Graduating back in 1967 with a BS degree in glass science and ceramic engineering. Bring me into that because we talk about creativity at home, and there was obviously creativity on campus at Alfred as well.
Well, the way I got to Alfred was very simply I fell in love with the campus. I have to be completely honest. At the time, I had been a science and math student in high school, and I thought being an engineer, would be great. And a friend of my father's recommended Alfred to my father, and so we went up and visited the campus, and I fell in love immediately. And I fell in love not only physically with the campus, but probably more importantly, the feeling
Yeah.
on the campus, which was extremely friendly, extremely outgoing. I met a number of the students. They were very open. I liked the diversity that I saw on the campus. And I just said, I'm going there. And as it turned out in my career, I only used glass science for 1 year and then went on to other completely different, if you will, professional experiences. But that's how I got to Alfred. It was a completely emotional reaction. The major could have been practically anything, frankly. It was
Yeah.
just all about walking the campus and meeting people.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because I have told them from being on campus that if they had recruited me, hindsight 2020, if they had recruited me and shown me what I have seen now, there's a really good shot that they would have had me. And there's something tremendous about Alfred University being so unique. And as you and I speak throughout your journey, as we're here today with a Saxon spotlight on Peter Cuneo, Peter, you and I discussed that your time at Alfred and not just the feel of it that made you say yes, but that they believed in you and that through adversity and through your journey, you felt like they were there for you and gave you a chance and an opportunity. I would love to go to that portion of your timeline and reflecting on what you feel like Alfred did for you as a young man back then.
Well, I was looking back. I was probably I started college at 17. I was a little immature for various reasons, and I had some family issues, which were, of course, back home in New York City. But I didn't handle the change well, and I was frankly a very poor student. In fact, the first 3 years at Alfred, I was on academic probation for 3 of the 6 semesters. Um, and I was just unable to balance my social life with academics, with other challenges that I had. And everyone has their story, and I have mine. So on. And then when I was due for my fourth year, my father had gotten ill, and I left Alfred for a year to go to work in New York,
Yeah.
and to support my family. I had three younger siblings. And I actually landed a very good job for a non-college grad in New York City at an engineering firm. And I did that for a year. And after the year was over, my father was better, and I was able to go back to Alfred. But in that year, I must say, I probably aged 4 years in terms of maturity. And rather than going back to my, shall we say, misguided ways, I was very serious now about myself, and I was on the dean's list. Amazingly, once I went back and I did a second junior year. So I was actually in Alfred for 5 years, getting my bachelor's, and I was out a year. So actually, I graduated 2 years later than my original class. But when I went back to Alfred, and this is so important, I don't know that they expected me even to come back. But when I did come back, the school was incredibly supportive of me, in effect, getting my act together. What did I need? Alfred has been like that for just about everybody, though. I was not an exception. It was all about helping, you know, providing an atmosphere that was conducive to, moving forward, if you will, in your life, and so on. And so Alfred really supported me when I came back. Not that they hadn't previously, and for that reason, looking back, that's why I've always, frankly, loved Alfred. I first went on the Board of Trustees in 1990.
Yeah.
And I was eventually the chairman of the board for 6 years. I'm chairman emeritus right now with regard to the board. But I wanted to give back, very badly to Alfred because they had supported me. I graduated from graduate school from Harvard Business School. But when it came to supporting a school, Harvard, I felt, never needed me. Harvard had plenty of people supporting them and plenty of financial support. But I thought I could make a difference at Alfred. And that's why I got so involved with Alfred many years after I graduated.
And when we reflect on that and that time, like you said, that you had there and just what it meant to you and giving back, what I found to be really special is after you and I had spoken off the air about your wife and her love for the equestrian world. For Maris, I went over and they brought me to the equestrian center. And right as you're pulling in, I took a picture next to the sign that says Maris Cuneo Equine Park. And so there's that piece of it as well, that not only yourself but your wife has been so connected with Alfred University, and that passion and that love, and it makes the world seem so small and so special when you and I can have a conversation about giving back, and then a few days after that I'm up at Alfred University and I'm pulling into the center and there's Maris's name, which was really special.
Well, Dan, I will share with you, of course, that I've been married to a wonderful woman for 52 years.
Congratulations.
My wife is an animal lover, and I will not pretend that I'm not anti-animals, of course, but I'm certainly not an animal lover to the extent she is. And she first got interested in the horse world, if you will, in competing in equestrian events when we were living in Canada. And she had a friend who was connected to basically to a barn where she could learn and find a horse and what have you. And this was many, many years after I graduated from Alfred. But I think the reason that Maris, my wife, horses particularly, is because her father was a mounted police sergeant in Jersey City, New Jersey. And that's where she first came across horses. And I think that There's no question that's the connection. So when she finally later in life had the chance to get involved and have her own horses and compete, and she's competed all around the East Coast.
Yeah.
And she didn't do it really to win, although she has her share of blue ribbons. She just did it because she loved the lifestyle, and so on. So when Alfred was looking for some help building its own equine center, because Alfred did not have its own going way back, she was more than happy to step up and support that, and she continues to support the equine center. We were up last year, and again, she had some financial resources that she could give to the equine center.
Yeah, and to see that, like you said, giving back, you continued that after a year working in as a quality control engineer for Owens Corning, a fiberglass corporation, you entered the U.S. Navy, and were able to achieve the rank of lieutenant, damage control officer, and then communications officer on the USS Joseph Strauss, the DDG-16, a guided missile destroyer. And your time in the Navy obviously brought you into the Vietnam War. And you and I had spoken about this, and I thought that this was an integral part of the conversation to have, that your father's connection to World War II, your connection to the Vietnam War, and the desire to give to the country, to protect and to put yourself on the line, is something that is well known in my family, very much appreciated, be it the Air Force, be it the Navy, be it the Army, and so on and so forth. I would love for you to go into kind of your father's story, as well as what made you feel like it was the right fit for you to challenge yourself in the U.S. Navy, and you obviously experienced the Vietnam War, which is a very controversial war and a tough time, but something that you know more firsthand than most.
Well, Dan, I sometimes say that I was born with an adventurer gene. Now, I don't mean that literally organically, but what I mean is this: my parents and my grandparents were people who could never do a desk job. They had to get out there,
Yeah.
that get out in the world, and that's how they coped. My grandparents, three of them were immigrants. One was first generation born, and several of them did not speak English when they came to the country, and they survived. They coped, and they did fine. They got through the Depression, for example, okay, and what have you. My parents were also get out there people. So my father, a little bit about my father. My father went to high school in Manhattan, in New York City. He was all city basketball player for 3 years in the early 1930s. He went to the University of North Carolina, and in 1936, he played basketball there, and they won the national championship in 1940, and he was the sixth man. Now, when I say national championship, there really was no national championship kind of playoff. So one can always debate who had the best team. But obviously, I want to believe it was North Carolina. At least that's what my father told me.
Yeah.
And then my father went to flight school in Pensacola, Florida, for the U.S. Navy in 1941. He flunked out. 90% of the class flunked out, and he became a navigator. And so he was still flying, and saw obviously some tough times in the South Pacific in the Navy. And my father was very affected, and he loved the Navy very much. And then he was in the New York City Fire Department, and as a reserve Navy officer, he was called back to active duty for the Korean War. He was ordnance officer on the USS Valley Forge, which was an aircraft carrier. And he loved the Navy and always wanted to stay in. But the Navy really only needed extra officers during wartime. During peacetime, generally they depended on people who had done NROTC or graduated from Annapolis. So he wasn't able to stay in, but he loved the Navy, and I grew up hearing about this. Um, I should mention also my mother was an EMT for 30 years. 30 years, most of that in the back of an ambulance,
Yeah.
going around Queens, New York. And so she was out there too. She was a working woman. And as I said, this is the atmosphere I grew up with. My immediate family were all doers, so to speak. And I never thought about this consciously back then. It's probably, decades later, it first occurred to me that that's one of the reasons I've pursued the interest that I have. So Vietnam War came. I had worked, as you pointed out, for a year as a quality control engineer in a fiberglass factory. And I felt I should go. And to be honest, I never worried about myself. I'm going to call myself stupid because I should have. But to me, it was just an adventure. And I never thought I'd be hurt. And I was very motivated, though. It all goes back to that one year I was out of Alfred, because now I'm almost a different person. And I was in the top 10% of my class in officer candidate school. And if you were in the top 10% of the class, you could broadly pick your assignment. And I picked destroyers in the Pacific. And I was assigned to the USS Joseph Strauss, guided missile destroyer, home ported in Pearl Harbor. But I actually joined the ship off of North Vietnam. So I flew back then, I flew out to the Philippines and then to a carrier, and then carrier heloed me out and dropped me on the fantail, the stern of the ship. And that's how I got started in the Navy. And again, I love the Navy. I did 2 tours in Vietnam. First, I was damage control officer. And then, as you mentioned, second, I was communications officer. And we were basically doing, if you will, some tough things off of North Vietnam and sometimes off of South Vietnam. But my experience being on a ship was nothing like the people in country. People in country had it much worse. They were under combat pressure 24/7 every day. We were not. We did have some scrapes, yes, but compared to what they were faced with, I was almost on a picnic, so to speak. So I want to give all the credit, really. We did do some good things, and we're engaged with the enemy from time to time, but nothing like what they went through. I love the Navy. I wanted to stay in the Navy. As it turned out, the Navy offered me what's called a regular commission, the same kind of commission that someone from Annapolis would get to stay in. They wanted me to stay, and I loved it. When you love something, you do well.
Yeah.
And but my new wife that time really felt that she didn't want to raise kids alone for 6 months of a year, because I was what's called a surface warfare officer, and I was going to be at sea 6 months a year. And I understood how she felt. So I did get out of the Navy at that point. But it was a wonderful experience, and I still recommend an experience in the military to anyone, whether you're an officer or an enlisted position. You will learn so much about life, about diversity, about leadership, things that many, many other young people will never learn.
Yeah. And, I can echo that, because I'm very grateful for my great uncle Bucky, my great uncle Vincent, and my great uncle Pat, who just passed recently, my great uncle Carmen, who just passed recently, and my grandfather on my dad's side and my grandfather on my mom's side too, all a part of World War II in some way, shape, or form, and part of every piece of it: the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. So when you take from that the experience, we've spoken here, Peter, about going to college and you're 17 years old and you're on academic probation, and you don't feel like you're as focused, and then you have to go check on your father, take care of your father, take care of the family, learn at such a young age what how fragile life can be. And you say, I gained 4 years in one. I come back to Alfred and you graduate a couple years later, then your classmates that you had. And we're looking at a person today that's been a part of multiple turnarounds, distressed businesses, well-known businesses, businesses that what they are today, nobody would have ever thought they could have ever been distressed. How does the person who is inexperienced and not as focused and, you know, kind of just going through life as a young kid, as a lot of people do, turn into, okay, I've grown a bit and now I've been in the military. So I can see the things that have happened in your life where you became more mature, where, you know, your knowledge and your wisdom increased. But how does that turn into being someone who is a mastermind of saving businesses, essentially giving them a heartbeat again, whether they flatlined or were about to? How does an inexperienced kid turn into a US Navy officer, turn into giving a heartbeat to a business?
I wish I knew all the answers. I think a couple of things. First of all, I do credit Alfred with encouraging me to take risks in a way, and to try things that maybe I didn't think I could ever accomplish. And I'll give you one dramatic example, and this was reinforced by a number of people that believed in me that I met throughout my life. So if we go back to the Navy, the captain of my ship, who I was a great mentor and someone I cared for tremendously. When I came back to my ship and the captain said, "Are you going to stay in?" I said, "No, I'm going to get out." And he said to me, "Peter, you should go to Harvard Business School." Now, of course, frankly, I didn't think of myself as a quote Ivy Leaguer. I certainly didn't know Harvard even had a business school. And my first reaction was, he's just being nice, you know. Now, the captain had gotten his doctorate from Harvard Business School, so there was a connection. But my grades, as I talked about, my overall average, Alfred, was average. So I didn't have much, I told him flat out I didn't think I had the grades to get in and what have you. And he said these words to me, which I think about even today, almost every day. He said to me, "Cuneo, you don't know how good you are." And of course, at the time, I didn't take him seriously. He was just being nice. So he encouraged me to get the application, which I did, and to take the business boards. And one of the things I have to say, for some reason, I've always had a knack on these big tests. Whether it was I never could have been a lawyer, but I did take the law boards and got a very high grade. On the business boards, I think I got 96th percentile. For some reason, on these tests, in high school, I might get a average grade in a class, but when I had to take, the New York State, you have tests that you're given to make sure that you're not getting a crazy grade. And I always get the test score would be much higher than my grade. I don't know. It just is what it is. Anyway, so he encouraged me to take the business boards, which I did, and I got a very good score. And I said to him, "But I can't. I'm not going to do this. My grades. I don't have these other people applying. I have senators and presidents writing, letters of recommendation." Long story short, because I could talk for hours about this, but it's all about someone believing in you. I got 3 recommendations from Navy admirals through the captain setting that up, and you have to write essays for that application. And we made my improvement in grades actually the subject of one of the essays, to talk about what had happened to me, and that apparently worked because I was accepted. And then at Harvard, frankly, again, I'm feeling, I can do anything in the world. And so I had academic honors. I was president of the International Business Club, and I it just from there, it just kept going. And so my career has been in building brands, whether they are hard lines, soft lines, or we'll talk about this, but intellectual property, superheroes. Another big theme is turnarounds, which you talked about in businesses. I've turned around 7 different businesses in my career. 3 were in Europe, 4 in the US. Most people think of me as the CEO of Marvel Entertainment, coming out of bankruptcy. And Marvel, 10 years later, sold the business to Disney for $4.5 billion. And then my other, if you will, centerpiece of my career has been serving on public boards in all manner of different positions. New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and so on. How I got into turnarounds, I actually had no idea that I'd be excited or motivated by doing a turnaround. So the first one that I got involved with, I was thrown into, without going to the details now. Found out that I liked it. I was crazy because I then started taking turnaround jobs that any normal human being wouldn't touch because of the risk factor. But I had become, again, going back to this venture gene or my service in the Vietnam War, where when you come back from a war, your idea of risk is completely different, of course, than the average person who's not been in a war. These jobs that I took, to me, were, again, adventures. I wasn't too worried about the risk. I found that I liked to be a fixer. I didn't know that until I got thrown into the first one. But most people would turn these jobs down, and I would argue most people were the sane ones. I'm the one who's a little off.
When you take these risks and you put yourself out there, I liken the world to a football field and a football stadium, I should say. And if there's 70,000 seats in the stadium, there's 22 players on the field. Pretty much everyone that's sitting in one of those 70,000 seats has an opinion about those 22 on the field. And they think they're better than those 22 on the field. They can do everything so much better. Their precision is better. Their vision is better. Everything is better, but they're sitting in the stands. And then there's 22 people on the field that may make mistakes, may have ups and downs, may fumble at the 1-yard line, but they keep playing the game. I value being one of the players on the field. You have been, for so many years, been the player on the field. What got you to be that person? Like you said, going through the military, you learn about taking risks and having appreciation, but you've gotten on the field and you've stayed on the field, and you've said to me on and off the air, I took something that somebody would have thought was crazy. You just were referring to that. Why are you not in the stands? Why are you on the field constantly playing the game that everybody thinks they can play, but so few actually try to play it?
Well, one thing I think that with me is very true, and I'm not suggesting other people are different on this, but I would tell you that I wake up every day with a list in my head, if not on a piece of paper, of things that I want to accomplish that day. Most of them are professional. There'll be some personal ones as well. It makes me feel good. It's very simple. It makes me feel good to accomplish these things, big and small, and feel that I have worth in the world. Okay? It's something that I need psychologically. I'm still working. I'm 79 years old. I'm chairman of 3 companies. I've got other things brewing, which if we want to, we could talk about later on, but I'm never going to stop. I like to think I haven't lost anything cognitively now. My wife might disagree, but I think it does keep me young, quote unquote. And I think I have to prove myself, not to other people, but I have to prove myself to myself every day. Call me crazy, not sure where that came from. I can't honestly tell you. But there is a point at which you aspire to leadership, where you really think, you know what, I can be an effective leader,
Yeah.
and I think I'm going to enjoy it too, and I think I can be successful. And by the way, I've not been successful at everything, but of course not. I'm a human being. I've made mistakes. On balance, it's turned out well, but I'm not perfect at all. But yeah, I think there was just a moment where I aspired. It was in the Navy. It was in the Vietnam War. As a particular incident in the war. It should take a little too long to describe on this call, but something happened that was very special. And I just thought to myself, and I'm loving this, so I got to do this for the rest of my life. This meaning leadership.
Yeah.
And there is an exact moment I can remember.
Would you be okay with expanding on that?
I'm happy to. The only reason I'm not resistant, is it's to do it right. It's going to take me 10 or 15 minutes, but I'll try to do it. And this is not a terribly dramatic moment, but I think you'll understand. So when you're on a Navy ship, in particular, now it's my case on a destroyer in the Pacific, one of the jobs that we were given in the war is plane guarding for aircraft carriers. Now, what this means is that when aircraft carriers want to launch or recover aircraft, they want to have, and it's typically a destroyer,
Yeah.
1 nautical mile in front of the ship and 1 nautical mile in trail, another one in trail, because the ships are playing lifeguard duty. The most dangerous time for naval aircraft is actually landing. And obviously the second most dangerous is taking off. And of course, in wartime, the Navy even operates in the middle of the night. And while I have taken off from carriers and landed actually in fighter jets, although I certainly wasn't flying the plane, I've never landed at night. I can only imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
So at any rate, it's a very beautiful sunny day. I am officer of the deck. So let me explain officer of the deck on the ship. Most people, if they haven't been in the Navy, still think that the captain of the ship is the one who's giving orders to the helm and to the engine order telegraph, which controls the engines. That might have been true in John Paul Jones's day, but that's long, long ago. The captains of Navy ships are far too busy to be standing there doing that. So they have another officer who's called the officer of the deck, who is qualified to drive the ship. And that's a very big deal, to be qualified to drive a big Navy ship. And typically, you're a junior officer, and I was a junior officer. So my first deployment, I was just learning how to drive the ship. I never actually had the full responsibility. And driving the ship could be with other ships. It could be doing underway replenishment, where you see the pictures of Navy ships next to an oiler or to an ammunition ship, or taking on various stores. See this all the time. And that evolution can take 4 hours to do that right. You need an officer of the deck who's actually driving the ship, taking on, or in my case, my destroyer. Landing and coming into this big ship to a dock anywhere is also not that easy, as you might imagine. So you practice, you learn, and eventually, if you're good enough, you get qualified as officer of the deck. And I was qualified as officer of the deck fleet. That means that I could drive my ship in the company of other ships, not individually. I'm officer of the deck. It is a nice day in the Tonkin Gulf over north of Vietnam. I forget the name of the carrier that we're doing plane guarding for, But when the carriers are not taking on aircraft or recovering aircraft, then you float around kind of at random, at slow speed, and waiting for something to happen. It could be several hours before something happens. It's probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as we say, 1400 in the military. And suddenly the carrier, whose call sign was Tip Top, calls my ship, which is called, our call sign was Fleet Fox. So you get a call, an encrypted call. Fleet Fox, this is Tip Top, take station, boom, 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 boom. In this case, they're telling us to go behind them. And the carrier will come to flank speed, which is top speed, which at that time would have been, for these big carriers, about 35 miles an hour, if you can believe that these giant ships can go that fast. And our speed, top speed, my ship was about the same.
Okay.
And so you have to do a relative motion calculation very quickly. Okay. Oh, here's the carrier. They're turning into the wind on the course they just gave me at full speed. I'm here. They want me to be 1 mile behind them. How do I get there from here? Okay. And as you know, everything is in motion. So it's not like you're aiming at a static point. Okay. And the other problem I happen to have is that I am just a couple of miles in front of the course that the carrier is turning to. And of course, the carrier has control. They're in control. They tell you what to do. And so I've done the calculation. I realize I'm going to have to pass close aboard to this carrier. So if this is the carrier, going this way, I'm out here and I'm going to have to go this way and come around behind. And so that's not hard when you have that much space. We're not in any danger. But I have to pass, I'm roughly 60 or 70 yards apart. Now, that may, in Navy terms, that's nothing. It's really close. But I have to get to station. And remember, this is a matter of life and death. We need to be in our station because planes are being recovered. And little known fact, Navy aircraft in the Vietnam War over North Vietnam had a 50% chance of being hit. Not necessarily knocked down, but hit. So they would be coming back to the carrier, damaged, trying to land on the carrier rather than go in the water. And if you're me, you do not want to be late to your position. So I'm going flank speed, carrier this way. And in New York City, if you know the West Side, the blocks, if you will, the long side of the blocks is pretty long. Well, if the carrier is going this way and I'm going this way, at relative motion, 70 miles an hour, that would be like driving down that street past the block in about 8 seconds. So the other thing that's officer of the deck has to know is the fact that big Navy ships don't turn on a dime. There's too much mass. There's too much energy. So when you tell the helmsman or the rudder to go over to start a turn, the ship continues to skid in the same direction you've been going for a while. Think of most people have had this experience. It's snowing, it's icy, you're on the road, and you're coming to it. You got to make a turn. You turn the wheel over, and the car continues to skid in the same direction.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it feels like on a big ship. Now, eventually, of course, the ship will turn. And so you have to give this order to turn, and it's largely feel. Some point in time, it might be 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever, depending on the speeds and the wind and everything else. To turn, because you're going to keep skidding before you actually turn. And I'm going by this carrier, and I've got to actually call for a turn that would be typically right at the carrier. Of course, it's going to be by me long before we get there. So it's a tricky situation. I also have a situation where we're so close that our turning radius is going to put me on the other side of the carrier, in the wrong, not right behind, because I'm passing so close to the carrier. So my ship had two propellers, two screws, we call them. So this allows me to twist the ship. That's one good thing about having two screws. I could back one engine, keep the other engine going forward at top speed, and it would twist that motion, the ship. So the turning radius would be much tighter than normal. And so that's, again, a judgment of when to do that, or what, so on and so forth. I won't bore everybody with it. And so I know I have to twist in.
Yeah.
Long story short, I will tell you that there's a certain element of luck here. I hit the spot perfectly. You know, again, I'm not saying there weren't other great ship drivers in the Navy, because there was. You know, I was just one, and that particular day, it turned out just right. So we are behind the carrier now, and literally as we get into position, here's the carrier. We're, you know, I'll do it this way, carrier, and we're behind. You hear the whine of the jets coming into land. Just as we get in position, they come right over the ship because they're low. And so I knew in my heart this certain element of luck, but we're in position where we should. And then I noticed that the carrier is flashing. Not much flashing lights anymore in the Navy because of all of the technology today. But back then, flashing lights were used all the time. And I was obviously too busy to try to read the lights, Morse code. I'm just busy trying to stay exactly in position. And the captain, the captain was watching, and I said, Captain, what are they saying? And he said, it's for you, Cuneo. I'm thinking, what? They don't even, you know. I said, what do you mean? He said, the message is Bravo Zulu, BZ. BZ in the Navy means well done. And at that moment was the moment I thought, oh my God, I'm 26 years old. I'm driving the ship with 320 people on board. You know, I'm doing something important with this carrier in the middle of the thing. And I probably got hooked. It just, in a sense, at that moment I became addictive. You know, and I still remember, so not super dramatic, although for me, very much so. And that was the moment it all changed for me.
And when you have that moment, and, you know, part two of our conversation here, our initial conversation, will be carried on Super Powered Pop as you're watching this one and listening to this one on Wake Up Call inside of the Saxon Spotlight. We're going to save some of this for the next part, but if I know, and we know now because you've spoken about that moment and you've spoken about what drives you, on the other side of that, if we know what gets you up to go do something, what's rewarding to you? How do you define success personally?
Well, first of all, you're raising a very good issue, because I often advise younger people who I do talk to from time to time to not let other people define success for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well-meaning friends, family will say to young people, or for that matter, older people, you know, you should be this, you should be that, you should do this, you should do that. Okay, and they are very well-meaning, but you in the end have to figure out what works for you. I couldn't be a lawyer. I couldn't be an accountant. Those are great professions, nothing wrong. And I work with lawyers and accountants in what I do quite a bit, but that just wouldn't have been right for me. So it's very important for young people to, you know, to get a handle on what will make you happy. Because if you work at something that doesn't make you happy, you're obviously not going to be happy.
Right.
And most people in this world, Dan, I believe, work at jobs they don't like.
I agree.
The best way, though, to start to figure out what works for you, what makes you feel good and makes you feel successful, makes you feel like you're okay. Okay. Is to learn your strengths and your weaknesses. One of the big problems we have today with leadership is we have a big lack of leadership, of leaders coming from young people. And I'm defining young as 30 and under, because they don't have the experiences they need to learn the instincts of leadership. And a lot of young people, because of over-parenting, because of the internet, I could go through 10 problems we have that are cultural, technology, where you don't learn your own strengths and weaknesses. And life is really very simple. We human beings make it complicated. You learn your strengths and your weaknesses, and on your weaknesses, you have two choices. It either may be valid in a situation. One is avoid, the other is work to get better. And you make a decision on what you think is the best situation. We learn from our mistakes far more than we learn from our successes. I only remember my successes, I'll call it, from 40,000 feet. But my failures, my mistakes, boy, I remember every little bit, every detail. But that's how we survive. That's how we get better. And so I think it's if you aspire to leadership, then that's what you have to do. And in that process of strengths and weaknesses, you will discover what success means for you, anyone as an individual. It will take time, though.
And with that, it's a perfect segue into what we're going to be speaking about on Superpowered Pop, as we will get into the essentials for superhero leadership and your work as CEO of Marvel Entertainment. So for this Saxon Spotlight, I want to thank Peter Cuneo for sharing his story. And folks, from speaking with Peter off the air, he's barely scratched the surface, but we've gotten to a lot of pieces and a lot of things that hopefully can enlighten you and open your eyes up to the fact that there is no exact science, no straight line, but that you learn through experiences of gaining knowledge and wisdom. And if you allow yourself to be honest with yourself, you have the ability to grow, and in that growth can become a leader, and in that leadership can make a difference in other people's lives. Peter, I want to thank you for this Saxon Spotlight. It's been an honor.
Well, thanks, Dan, very much. And good luck and much success to all the listeners out there.